Welcome to Stipkolive. I'm Aaron Stipkovich, and we're here in Washington, D.C. to talk to Vice Admiral Norbert R. U.S. Navy Vice Admiral Norbert R. How are you, sir?
I'm great.
Before anything, thank you for your service. I'm honored just to sit in your office here, and I really do mean that. Thank you very much, sir.
Oh, it's great to have you here. Thank you.
You know, I want to talk a little bit about your recent trip to Afghanistan, but before we do that, before the interview, you had given me an answer. You said, challenge everything, and that answer was to a question that I had about if you had kind of the magic wand, or if you could make your wish list about how to sort out the economic involvement in how the military is being handled right now. When I say economic involvement, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it,
right.
Money is controlling so much of what's happening in both the defense world as well as just the social world here.
Right.
And you gave me a very interesting answer preceded by challenge everything. Would you mind telling me more about that?
Well, I just think with the 3 Ds of the deficit, the debt, and the demographics, the country really has to come together. And I think everybody has to be part of the solution. I think the Defense Department has stated that a little bit, and some of the leaders in Congress have tried to emphasize that everybody has to be part of the solution. And because the military is so highly appreciated by the citizens of this country, I think the Defense Department can take a lead in challenging itself in areas just as we want all the other departments of government and the different groups of people to say, what can we do to contribute to getting out of this dilemma that we're in?
Yeah, there's, you know, there seems to be some hypocrisy from certain areas where, you know, they say, well, this is kind of pork spending, this is a little too much. Mm-hmm. And then moments later, they'll turn around and say, well, it wasn't enough, and then they'll turn around and say it's too much again, and just to fit sort of their agenda. And in the meanwhile, you've got these wonderful men and women in the armed forces who are sort of taking the blows.
Well, that is one of the things our members do in the military that we've talked to and their families. They want to be part of the solution, but they don't want to be taken advantage of.
Right.
And I think that is very, very critical. After 10 years of war, the Congress has helped keep this country on the right track as far as recognizing and keeping its commitments to the military for the last 10 years. But no question, this 112th Congress came back, and their horizons have come in a little bit on the national security area because, as
right.
you said, focus on the deficit, the economy, and getting jobs. But can you imagine where we'd be if we had another 9/11 with the economy? So we can't take this all-volunteer force for granted,
right.
or it could go in a ditch.
Right, absolutely. Boy, that's kind of an eye-opener when you say 10 years of war. It's kind of making me sit back a little bit. We've been in 10 years of war. Speaking of which, you were recently in Afghanistan, and you had an opportunity both in Iraq and Afghanistan to sort of make a comparison between the two regions after their own component of the war, the 10-year war, as you
right.
put it.
Right.
What's the, if you don't mind me using this phrase, what's the word on the street there? I mean, how are our men and women feeling at this point?
Well, let me just say, I mean, first of all, just going into Afghanistan for the first time after the last 4 years going to Iraq, the one thing that strikes you first is that our country has made an enormous commitment to both of these countries to give them a chance. Right now, we've had over 1,800 men and women killed in Afghanistan, and just about 15,000 wounded. And we've over doubled that in Iraq. And so our country has paid an enormous price to give both of these countries a chance.
Right.
So that's the first thing. The word on the street, as far as my looking at the analysis of where we were in Iraq in 2007 versus now where we are in Afghanistan in 2011, the countries are very different, but 3 things encouraged me about where we are now in Afghanistan. The first is the surge of troops that President Obama ordered has definitely had a dramatic impact on the kinetics. We're going after and getting a lot of the bad guys over there. And so attacks by the Taliban and the Haqqani network are down significantly.
Absolutely.
And so that's a good thing. And so the surge is definitely, I think, beginning to give the Afghani people a little bit of hope that maybe they can work their way through this after 3 decades of war between the Soviets and everything else that has gone on there.
Right.
So there's still a lot of folks sitting on the fence, but 50% of the Afghan population is below 25. And so they don't remember the Soviets.
Right.
And all they remember is now. And so which side are they going to go on? Are they going to side with the government and their own Afghan security forces? I mean, I think that's the hope, that they're getting some more security in major population areas. Still a lot of work to do. But I see the same thing building that I saw the first time I went to Iraq, where General Petraeus had the troops operating in support with and living side by side the Iraqi army and the Iraqi National Police.
Right.
They're doing the same thing now, Aaron, in Afghanistan. And I see the same building and coalescing of the troops, going out in combat actions at night and a day together, and building some esprit and some training in the Afghan soldiers. Totally different in a lot of respects, because the Afghan population is largely illiterate, about 80% of them. And so General Allen, who's in charge of the security forces over there, the international security forces that have 51 countries involved,
Right.
He showed us a picture of the 100,000th Afghan graduating from boot camp. And all of them have to be able to read at the first grade level by the time they graduate. Well, that alone is transforming this country, getting these folks some education, and spending an hour a day in boot camp learning how to read. So if you can imagine that and the impact and the difficulty of it, but the fact that it's beginning to work. So the surge is working. The other thing our country can be proud of is we have the A-team over there in leadership positions. Ryan Crocker, the ambassador, is the same guy that worked with General Petraeus in Iraq and
Right.
General Odiniro,
Right.
A proven, really top-notch ambassador. And then we have General John Allen, Marine 4-star over there, leading this international coalition. They are the A-team. They have the respect of our forces, of the international countries that are over there. And in fact, General Allen deserves a lot of credit for building that coalition. It is a significant coalition. I believe it's the largest coalition of troops supporting an effort over there. And so I think that's very, very encouraging that we have that. So we have the surge that's working. We have the right leadership there, and then most importantly, we have the right strategy, the same strategy generally that was successful in Iraq, of getting side by side with the Afghan soldiers and the Afghan police and helping them to train and pushing them. And I'm a believer in this having deadlines to force people to move on. Now, I'll caveat that a little bit, but these deadlines are a good forcing function for the Afghans, just like it was the Iraqis, to step up to the plate. I saw them do it over 4 years in Iraq and how successful it was as they gradually took over and built
Right.
their confidence. The same thing is going on at a very embryonic stage now in Afghanistan, where the Afghan security forces are beginning to take over a couple of provinces. They have that going step by step all the way to 2014, to December of 2014. So I think that is working, and that strategy of side-by-side counterinsurgency is the right thing. So those 3 things are very positive. The difficulties, of course, are the Afghan economy is in shambles. Their infrastructure's got to be built up.
Right, non-existent.
And, they don't have the literate population. So that makes it harder, but I'm very encouraged by what we have done and where we're going there. The thing about deadlines, I would say, is this 2014, December of 2014, is that is a deadline only in that our forces will then go into the support role. And the Afghans will do the fighting, and we'll be there to mentor them, to train them, to coach them,
Right.
and provide that kind of expertise. But we're not going to abandon that country. General Allen and Ambassador Crocker are working very closely with Afghan leadership to try and have a stable partnership that can go on for decades, so that the bad guys can't think they can outweight
Right.
this coalition of
Right.
51 countries. So that's why I'm encouraged, despite how hard it is and despite the enormous sacrifices that we paid.
You know, that was a fantastic observational narrative. I'd love to know what your personal sort of opinion is about the situation, and talk about early withdrawal there. You know, that's everything that you've just described sort of outlines and places value on some degree of sustained involvement there, so that
Yeah.
we're not getting out too early.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what, the general populace that doesn't understand the intricacies of what we're doing there, they say, well, just get out. Why do we have to be there? That's
Right.
kind of a common question. And so if you would tell me a little bit about your opinion about why we still need to be there to sort of finish the job, if you will.
It's a very good question, and it's a very tough one to get across to the American public, because we do have our challenges here with, as we talked about, the deficit, the debt, the demographics, getting our own economy going. But this is something we've started, and I think we deserve a lot of credit for sticking it out in Iraq. We've given the Iraqi population a chance now to determine their future. And we're leaving, not as conquerors, we're leaving as liberators.
Right.
And so I think it's a really positive thing about America's willingness to support its allies.
Right.
I think we need to do the same thing in Afghanistan for even more important reasons. And that is, this is where the 9/11 attacks originated from. And so the efforts that are ongoing in Afghanistan have a rippling effect all around that region. If you look at all the borders, you have China bordering Afghanistan, you have Pakistan, you have India,
Right.
you have Iran,
Right.
you have all the stands. And all of them are watching this, and all of them are influenced by the lawlessness that had pervaded in Afghanistan. And a lot of it had gone into Pakistan. And so I think we're really helping, whether the Pakistanis realize it now or not, we're helping Pakistan get its act together also of how they want to treat these territories. And how they want to interact with those groups. And so I think it's opening a lot of eyes there.
Yes.
That this whole area is ripe to change direction.
Right.
And change from this terrorism and unlawful areas and ungoverned areas. It's not going to happen overnight, but I think we can have a dramatic impact on the stability of that whole region. And when you look at nuclear weapons in Pakistan, anything we can do to help get that government and that country on a more stable path, I think, is doable.
Yeah.
And of course, Afghanistan, it has trillions of dollars in minerals and wealth. It's going to take time to develop that. The Chinese are already in helping with billions of dollars there, and hopefully as we get more security, more countries will be able to come in there and develop that country. But getting rid of the drug traffic that disrupts all of those countries around there is very important. But more than anything, this is for our good and for our good of reputation worldwide, that when we start something, we're going to finish
Right.
it and we're going to leave it better. It has been an enormous cost.
Right.
And I saw that cost while I was over there. I saw wounded soldiers, I saw draped caskets leaving. So this is not a fun thing, but this is something that I think we have to do. We have to finish this and send the signal to everybody that's watching that America finishes what it starts.
It's a tough thing to follow.
It's a tough situation. My one concern, and this was a very good question, Aaron, is we have to be careful that we do it right.
Right.
And so far the administration has listened to the military, and they're trying to do this in a phased manner. But I have one concern, and that is that we may start this drawdown too soon because of the lack of getting the points across that we need to the American public. As you know, we're going to bring down 10,000 troops this year.
Yeah.
And we spoke with General Allen. He's very comfortable with that up through December, because we've got Afghani army building up, we've got the Afghan National Police and local police building up. We're making progress. And those 10,000, by and large, are not going to be warfighters. The problem is in the next tranche of 23,000 that will be asked to leave by the end of September next year. To me, and this is just listening to what was going on over there, it doesn't make sense that those 23,000 are going to be leaving right as we crescend in the middle of the end of the fighting season next year. As you know, in Afghanistan, because of the severe winters with the mountains and with the growing season,
Right.
they have a fighting season over there. Right. It sounds illogical, but that's the way the bad guys do it. And so they kind of wrap up the fighting season in the November time frame. My question is, these next 23,000 are all going to be combat troops, or the majority of them are going to be combat troops. What's the difference if we say, instead of bringing them home by the end of September, we ask the question, a good question, I think, can't we just say we're going to get them home by Christmas? That would allow them to finish the fighting season, allow the Afghan army to have that chance before they take over a majority of the provinces in 2013, and they reach their final training and develop the size of their force by the end of 2013. Then we can transition out of the fighting altogether in 2014. I think a couple more months, maybe 3 more months for that 23,000 makes enormous sense, because it's still fragile, it's still not irreversible, that the progress could be reversed. And I think it's very important to have a very successful season. This isn't going to be won by just killing the bad guys. It is an international effort. It is a State Department and civilian effort in so many segments. But you've got to defeat the bad guys and have 2 seasons in a row where they go home with their tail between their legs.
You know, that brings up so many questions and statements, but let me start with the fact that I think that if one thing could be done better, the one thing that me as a civilian, I would like to see both the military as well as the governmental agencies all sort of communicate a little bit better to the American people that this is a preventative measure. This is not warmongering. This is not, an intention to prolong anything longer, 1 second longer than it has to. We don't want to waste a single drop of blood of anyone's. But in order to prevent, you've really got to go through these measures, and I think you've hit it home there. There's some murkiness about the, and again, we don't want to get into operational details, but there's some murkiness about who the opponent is, who the enemy, who are we fighting in Afghanistan. Recently, I spoke with the CIA head who was in charge of the Weapons of Mass Destruction unit in Iraq, which actually brought him in there and found whatever it is they found, and that's a whole other topic.
Right.
And he said, in Iraq it was crystal clear. You had an opponent A, and the boundaries were here and there. Now we're in Afghanistan, where is it the government? Are the boundaries of the opponent the actual boundaries that you described that are China and India and so on, or is it some faction? Is it just Al Qaeda? Who is the opponent? Who are we talking about?
I think the CIA and General Allen, who's in charge of the international security forces, would be a lot better person to ask that. My sense of it is it's very complex, and of course it's very tribal. In Afghanistan, you have 1,000 valleys, and so you've never had, for decades, a really strong central government. And so, like in Iraq, I would say the parallel is that with the success that we're having and the three things that I mentioned that I think are going well, the surge, our leadership, and the strategy, they're all working. But I would say, just like in Iraq, the governance is lagging behind, just as it was in Iraq, trying to get all these different factions to pull together. The same problem, magnified, is going on in Afghanistan. And then to top it off, you have what they call business, what we call corruption, where everybody takes a cut. And that undermines a lot of how people, I think, out in these 1,000 valleys think of the federal government, if they think of it at all. But I think we have to give them some time. Our own democracy wasn't formed overnight. We certainly had a lot of battling. I'm encouraged that President Karzai is having this 2,000 group of elders come in to talk about the future and trying to build a consensus for having a longer-term relationship with the United States and the rest of the allies in the area. I think that will send a strong signal that the bad guys can't outweigh the U.S. and our NATO and our international security force allies. I think that would be a very important step if the Afghan folks said that they want to have an agreement with the allies that have helped them to gain their independence and start to develop their country. If we can do that, I think that'll go a long way to getting a lot of the bad guys, whether you're talking about the Taliban, the Haqqani network, the different tribes, and the lawlessness that goes on there. I mean, that's another thing that we're doing, is helping them to get a better handle on the drug traffic and the drug growing there in the country. And so infrastructure can only help that that challenge.
Is it the lack of infrastructure, is it the lack of health care, or is it the extreme lawlessness and violence that accounts for 50% of the population being under 25?
Well, a lot of it is, of course, just the fourth poorest country in the world. Life expectancies aren't that much, and people have multiple children,
right,
because it's an agrarian society, and so that makes sense, and it's
right,
tradition, and so that's not a bad thing that they have that population. It's something that can really shape the country. I think the thing that the government has to do is they have to figure out a way to get more buy-in by the 34 provinces and all these tribes, that they have a say in this thing. It's not going to come easy, but I think that will be very critical to get the confidence of the international community also to
right,
invest in that infrastructure. But the number one problem in Afghanistan is the lack of security. That's why so many people are still on the fence. They've seen this for decades. This group is going to take care of you, this group is going to take care of you. And so, they've learned you play it, you stay on the fence until the bad, you determine who is going
right,
to have the biggest guns in town and the
right,
biggest bat in town.
Right.
And so they're making progress. Our General Allen and Ambassador Crocker and our team and the allies are making progress on that. The latest polls show that,
right,
that have come out from the Pew Foundation. So they're making progress, but it's not irreversible.
right.
And so that's why I think we really need another good year of implementing this strategy and a phased in of the Afghans taking over the provinces. So this can't be shortcutted because of whatever is going on domestically. So I really hope that the National Command Authority, the President, the Joint Chiefs, everyone will reconsider when this 23,000 needs to be drawn out, and they get the troops home by Christmas rather than by end of September. I think that's a critical issue that is going to hurt us next year, because we made a lot of progress in the south, Kandahar and the Helmand provinces you've heard a lot about.
Yeah.
But we need to do more there, and then we need to go east to the border. And that's what the focus is going to be next year. That's no secret. It's not classified. That's where the challenges are. And I think if they get the chance to do that, they will expand the security of the population areas and build more confidence in the government. And then the key, I think, to nationalism...
The confidence.
Yeah, and the key to I think, a feeling of nationalism in Afghanistan, I see the same thing that I saw in Iraq. It's growing in their pride in the Afghan security forces, their army and their national police, and even their local police, that get 40% once we come in and clean out an area. The local police take over kind of as the neighborhood watch.
Right.
There's growing pride in that security force and what they're able to do, but it's fragile, and it needs some more time. They need some more time to build to the support they need and get the professionalism they need. But they've got some impressive things going on there, and I hope we give them the time to do that.
I hope so too.